Hi everybody, it's great to be back here again on Itmar. It's Friday. Let's get down to our Torah lesson. This week's portion, Parashat Vayishlach. Last night there was a very, very special wedding at Binyanei Ha'umah in Jerusalem. A wedding that the bride, Sarah, and her husband, Ariel, they invited all of Israel to celebrate with them. And what was the reason behind this? The wedding was postponed 10 days. As we all know, 2 weeks ago, her father and brother of the bride were murdered in a terrible terrorist attack near Otniel, in the southern part of Israel, of Judea and Samaria. And the amazing thing was that this wedding wasn't a personal invite of family and friends, but it became a wedding of all of Israel. Everyone was invited. And ministers of the government, chief rabbis of cities came. Not only that, people came all the way from diaspora. I heard people came from Canada that were never in Israel before. It was the first time they came. Not only that, the wife of the prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, showed up, and the great singer Avram Fried, famous singer, surprised the couple by his performance. The question is, where does this come from, this amazing love of compassion to identify with someone's pain, to celebrate? Where does it come from? This week's portion, I thought, has an amazing insight on this particular happening, an event that could be a lesson for all of us. We see that we know that Jacob struggled with the angel, the famous struggle with the ministering angel of Esau. And what happens, the result was a personal injury to his thigh. As we say in Hebrew, his gidan Hashem. And therefore the Torah comes up with a prohibition that the people of Israel can no longer eat the gidan Hashem of an animal. It has to do with the hind legs of an animal, just like Jacob stood on his legs, so the back legs are like the feet, the legs, whatever. They can't eat of an animal. It doesn't apply to birds, it applies only to animals. And so the question that we must ask ourselves is why? Because of a personal injury of Jacob, the entire house of Israel now cannot participate in eating this gidan Hashem. Well, in reality, the gidan Hashem doesn't have much of a taste. It's a sinew. It is the sciatic nerve, and it can't have much of a taste anyway. But obviously there's something very, very symbolic about this whole particular thing. And before we go a little further in explaining, we look in the tractate of Chulin, which talks about animals, kosher laws. A very interesting discourse takes place in the Mishnah between Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis. And they argue over if the law applies to only kosher animals or non-kosher animals. Well, what does that mean? For example, if someone would eat a non-kosher animal like a pig, the sinew, this forbidden sinew, this sciatica nerve, would he be transgressing the law of gidan Hashem? Obviously, a person can't eat non-kosher, so it wouldn't make a difference. But it would make a difference. Why? Because a person could be considered transgressing two transgressions. If he would eat from a gidan Hashem, he would be eating non-kosher from the pig, of a pig I'm saying, plus he would be eating a gidan Hashem. So it'd have two things. But if it would say it doesn't apply to non-kosher animals, then he would only be transgressing eating from a non-kosher animal, not from eating of the sinew, the forbidden sinew. But anyway, it's not just semantics, it's Jewish law and has a lot of depth behind everything. But we're not going to get into that now. The rabbis, on the other hand, argue that only, and this is the law that we go by, the majority of the rabbis say, that the law applies only to kosher animals. So, and the question is, what is the reasoning behind the rabbis and Rabbi Yehuda? It's a very deep reason. Rabbi Yehuda says, well, look, Jacob lived and his family lived before the giving of the Torah, and therefore they were allowed to eat non-kosher. And since they were allowed to eat non-kosher, therefore it must apply to non-kosher animals. Although in reality, we all know that Jacob and Abraham, the family, the patriarchs and their children, kept the entire Torah anyway, and they didn't transgress the Torah before it was given. They were abiding by the Torah. But there's a theoretical understanding. Since they were allowed to eat non-kosher, although they didn't, if they would they be prohibited to eat of the gidan Hashem? Would it be an additional transgression? I mean, would it be a transgression for them who were allowed to eat non-kosher? And the answer is, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it applies to non-kosher animals, and therefore they would be transgressing two transgressions: eating from a non-kosher animal. Sorry, one transgression, eating of a non-kosher animal. They were allowed to eat non-kosher animals, but so that wouldn't be a problem. But they would be eating of the sinew that's forbidden. And he said the law is basically taught at such a time when Jacob was alive before the Torah was given. But the rabbis say no. The law was given. Once the Torah was given on Sinai, that's really when the law was given. And therefore, it applies only to kosher animals. Because we can't, obviously the law applies only to kosher animals because the law was given on Sinai, he says. And why was it given then, why is it mentioned in regarding Jacob? According to the rabbis, and they say it's to give us the reason behind it, which means the Torah gave the prohibition of eating this sinew, this forbidden sinew, because of the story of Jacob. Anyway, I wanted to do this quick introduction. I do not want to get into the detailed law, but just for you to understand a little bit about what's going on, so we can go on now. And the question is, again, getting back to the original question, personal injury. Because of Jacob's personal injury of his thigh, it came out of the socket. So now we can't eat kosher animals, their sinews, the forbidden sinew, the sciatic nerve. Why is that about? There are different reasons brought down by our famous commentators. I'll give just a couple of examples. One example brought down by the Chinuch. It was again anonymous. They don't know exactly. It was written in the 13th century, but there are different opinions who wrote it. And he writes that this represents the struggle of the people of Israel throughout generations with Esau, with the Edomite kingdom. And it shows that although we're going to suffer and we're going to have hardships, but we're going to overcome, God willing, by the redemption, we will overcome these struggles and they will not succeed. The Edomite kingdom wiping out the people of Israel, we will survive and overcome. And that's sort of reflected in the prohibition of eating the Gid Hashem. The Chizkuni says, another 13th century master, writes something very interesting. The fact that Yaakov was left alone, Jacob, the father, was left alone. It says, Vayivate Yaakov levado, he was left alone, and then he wrestled with the angel. He should have been escorted by his children. And the fact that they left him, it's a punishment not to be able to eat the Gid Hashem because of the fact that they abandoned their father in the time of need, which wasn't a proper thing. But again, then there's a beautiful explanation, another metaphorical explanation by the Kli Yakar. Again, he lived later on, the 17th century, famous Kli Yakar. He writes something very interesting. He writes that the Gid Hashem refers to the parts of the Torah that are very, very difficult to attain and understand by the ordinary person. And therefore we must refrain from the Gid Hashem, from tasting those deep concepts that our intellect can't grasp. Okay? Of course, he mentions there are only very few select individuals that have the ability to be able to learn such very, very deep things. And most people should focus on things that they can grasp. Especially nowadays, he says, in his time, the 17th century, and today even more so, we're so surrounded by materialistic distractions and other things that could pull us away from the proper path. Because when people go and get involved in things that are beyond their understanding, it could lead to straying away from the path. And that's what the prohibition of Gid Hashem says, the Kli Yakar. Interesting. I gave 3 examples. You can see there I've heard. I'm not going to mention his interesting explanation. But I would like to get to my explanation. That's why I'm rushing a little bit here. It's almost Shabbat in Israel. And we have a trip coming up on Sunday. We're traveling abroad to America for a speaking tour for the next few weeks. So I'm going to be away. And hopefully I don't know if I have the inspiration in America to give a Torah lesson, but I'll try. I don't know. Again, the time. I don't know if the time's going to work out. But anyway, let me get to my feeling. Last night after this amazing wedding, I thought about it. And I said, wow. I realized Hashem sent me an answer to explain why we can't eat the sciatica nerve. And if you think about it, what happened over here? Jacob was wrestling with an angel, and he was injured. So what does that teach us? And then therefore we can't. God says you can't eat from the Gid Hashem, from this forbidden sinew. Why? He was telling us something so simple but profound. Look at your father. Look at Abraham. Look at Jacob. How he's suffering. Do you feel his suffering? Do you feel his pain and anguish? I want you to realize that you should identify when someone's in pain and someone is hurting. Just like he's limping, you should be limping. Meaning your heart. You should feel that pain that he's going through, someone who's suffering and someone who's not in a healthy situation. And that is why you can't eat the Gid Hashem. And this is so precisely comes out when after wrestling with the angel says, now your name will be no longer Jacob, but your name will be Israel, Yisrael in Hebrew. What does it mean? Yashar El, straight with God, which means the Nashem means to jump out of place. Rashi explains it. Like the leg went out of the socket. It wasn't aligned anymore. You have to realign the leg, realign that sinew. By how? By demonstrating your love and compassion for here your father that was hurt, that wasn't feeling well. And this is what Israel means, to show our unity and identifying with the pain of one another. When someone is not feeling well, you should feel his pain, and that will create unity, and that will rectify the disunity, that will rectify the disalignment. Again, when the leg was, what's the word? It came out of its place. Dislocated, that's the word I'm looking for. When the leg was dislocated, you want to relocate that leg, and that's by showing unity. And that's an important message of what Israel is all about. Am Yisrael shows, God is saying you must unify and show your love for one another. You can't remain indifferent about the pain of your fellow brother. And this message is so important for generations, for all time, because exile stems from the disunity, the 10 tribes being lost, and all of Israel scattered about the nations. And now God is bringing us back to unify ourselves, to try to show our love for one another. Literally, we have to turn the Jacob limping into a dance. And that is exactly what happened at the wedding. How could someone limping dance? But that's the beauty of it. You can rectify that and turn someone who's limping into a dance and show a dance of love and compassion. And that, I think, in a very, very quick explanation, I think it's a very, very powerful insight that should reach the hearts of every individual. The house of Israel is supposed to bring a light to the nations, a light to the world, showing what unity is all about, showing our love and compassion for brother and sister. The world, every person in the world, not only Israel, but the nations of the world as well, should show their love and compassion for one another, for mankind. We all should show our love for one another, and to bring true peace to the world. When someone's in pain, to feel someone's pain. This, of course, is needed so greatly at a time when the world is in such turmoil and anguish. And look what's happening in terrorism throughout the world. And the world is realizing it's not only a fight for Israel against this evil Islamic threat, fundamentalism, which is coming along, this extremism to destroy and undermine what true humanity is all about. And this we have to show, and this is reflected within the concept of the Gida Nasheh. It's so interesting. In Hebrew, the word Hanasheh comes from the Hebrew word meaning to give up on something that belongs to you. A nosheh in Hebrew is someone who wants to get back a loan that's owed to him. Something gets owed to him, he tries to get it back. So nasheh means to sort of give up on it, to despair. And God is saying, no, you're forbidden to partake of despair. You shall not have despair. You shall only have hope, and know that you can bring about unity. And this is what the mankind needs today, to believe in unity, to believe in world rectification, to believe in true peace to humanity. And that really will come understanding what the Torah is all about, what the nation of Israel is all about, which will reflect upon all mankind and bring about a true redemption. And I want to bless you all with a wonderful Shabbat and a wonderful, again, month. I hope I do get a chance to give a lesson in the next few weeks coming ahead, but it may be an interruption, unfortunately, because I'll be on important shlichut, what's it called in Hebrew? Shlichut means to be an emissary. We're going on a speaking tour to try to strengthen the hearts of everyone who loves Israel, wants to stand with Israel, and try to bring Am Yisrael together, realizing we must stand and support and build the land. And this is so important. In this time, we are at a struggle at every one of our fronts. Israel is struggling for survival. We have to fight against this terrible, terrible evil in the world, and it comes from unifying and being together and unite with one another. Thank you so much for participating in my classes over the years. And I love you all and miss you all. And I hope I do find time somehow in the United States to give a lesson. So anyway, Shabbat Shalom, Besorot Tovot, Yeshuot V'Nechamot. Bye-bye.